Welcome to another deep dive. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us for this one. I think you're going to find this one pretty interesting.
Yeah, it should be a good one.
So, we're all about cutting through all the noise out there. I mean, there's just so much information these days. It's overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
And this is your chance to really dive deep into some really complex ideas, but in a way that's clear and engaging. And today we are diving into The Secret of Secrets, Vol 1.
Right. And we got some really fascinating excerpts from this book that we're going to be exploring together today. This book really gets into some of the big questions about life. Like, who are we, really? What is it about the society we live in that shapes us, sometimes in ways we might not even realize?
Right.
And then what does it even mean to be spiritual? And is there actually a way to change ourselves, not just superficially, but like really from the inside out? And just to be clear, we're not here to tell you what to believe.
Right.
Our goal is to just kind of explore the different ideas and perspectives that this book offers. And then, you can take it from there. You can decide what resonates with you and what doesn't.
That's right. It's about empowering you, the listener, to think for yourself and make your own conclusions. And one of the things that really struck me right away in these excerpts was this idea that society seems to put so much emphasis on the physical body, like our appearance, our health, our achievements in the world. And it almost feels like that emphasis can sometimes come at the expense of our inner lives, like our souls.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's interesting because the text really digs into this, and it even suggests that sometimes even the institutions that are supposed to be about inner growth, like, churches or temples,
Right.
can actually become more about outward appearances and rituals than about genuine self-reflection. Like, it's almost as if the external actions become a substitute for actually doing the real inner work.
Exactly. It's like we get this message that going to a certain place or performing certain actions is the same as actually looking within ourselves,
Right.
And then the text introduces this really interesting concept of the man of soul, who's kind of like this ideal figure. It's like they've managed to break free from all of these societal constraints and find their own way.
Right. And what's even more interesting is that the text makes a point of saying that this man of soul isn't just like a Christian or a Hindu or a Muslim,
Right.
It's like they've gone beyond those labels, those kind of human-created systems, to connect with something deeper.
Something universal, something that transcends all of those categories that we tend to put people in.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's this really powerful moment in the text. It's where there's someone who's dying, and they're told us something really startling. It says, you cannot die in the first place because you never lived.
Wow. That is a pretty intense statement to hear when you're on your deathbed.
Yeah, no kidding. It's definitely a wake-up call. I mean, it really forces you to confront this question of what does it actually mean to truly live, right?
Right. What is that genuine experience of life that this text is talking about?
Yeah. And, it goes on to talk about how a lot of us kind of sleepwalk through life, like we're just going through the motions, and we're so caught up in what other people think or expect of us.
Right. Like we're living based on these external validations rather than truly connecting with who we are on the inside.
Exactly. And so what the text is suggesting is that real life, like the kind of life where death actually becomes a possibility, that only starts when we begin to see ourselves directly without all of those external distortions, those filters.
Without all the noise. Yeah. And that's something that we each have to do for ourselves,
Right. Absolutely. It can't be outsourced, not to some guru or even to our friends and family.
It's a very individual journey, a personal encounter with who we are.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. The text even makes this point that our preoccupation with what others think about us, it's actually a symptom of our own inner emptiness.
Oh, yeah.
Like the more we're focused on those external validations, the more it reveals a kind of absence within ourselves, a deep sleep.
A deep sleep. Now, the text mentions the secret of the golden flower as this guide to help us wake up, to really become alive. And this is where the concept of Tao comes in. It's often translated as the way.
Right. And what's really central to this idea of Tao is that it's said to exist through itself, meaning that it's kind of like the ultimate reality.
It's the source of everything.
Yeah, and it's beyond words.
Yeah.
It's impossible to fully grasp or express, but the way itself, the path to realizing this ultimate reality,
Mm.
that can be shown,
Mm.
often by someone who's already walked that path,
Yeah.
like a master or a teacher.
A guide.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the text doesn't limit this concept of the way to just one specific spiritual tradition,
Right.
It draws parallels to ideas like God in Christianity and Islam, Dharma in Buddhism, and even logos, which is more of a philosophical concept, but it's this principle of divine reason or order that you find in ancient Greek philosophy and Judaism. It's like it's pointing to this common thread that runs through all of these different belief systems.
Exactly. It's not about pushing one particular set of beliefs, but it's more about highlighting this universal principle, this kind of fundamental essence of existence that transcends those individual religions. It's about seeing the common ground.
The underlying truth. Yeah. Now, there's this really beautiful image that the text uses to describe the self.
Yeah.
And it talks about starting as darkness and then having the potential to transform into a sourceless golden light. That sounds pretty amazing, but can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So what's really fascinating here is that the text suggests that getting to know this inner light is like tapping into a form of immortality.
Immortality.
Yeah, because the idea is that light, in its purest form, doesn't really die.
Yeah.
It just kind of changes its appearance. Like it might be hidden or it might manifest in different ways, but it's always there.
That's interesting. And the text actually connects this to what modern physics tells us about the nature of reality.
Oh, right. Yeah, it points out that science and Tao, in a way, they kind of agree on this really fundamental level,
Yes.
They both say that everything is, at its core, made of light.
Energy.
Right.
Yeah.
And the forms that we see, like, our bodies, trees, the stars, they're all just temporary ways that this light is manifesting. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. It's like ancient wisdom and modern science are meeting in this really amazing way.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about this idea of the circulation of the light, which is a practice for us, and finding inner balance, because this seems really important.
Yeah, definitely. So the text talks about how we can consciously gather our thoughts together as a way to circulate this inner light. And it uses this symbolism of the heavenly heart, which is said to reside in this middle ground, right? Between the sun, representing active male energy, and the moon, representing passive female energy.
Yeah.
It's this perfect balance point.
And it's interesting because the text points out that, especially in Western societies, there's often this imbalance, right?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Where we lean too much towards activity, toward that sun energy, like always doing, always achieving. And we neglect the receptive, the moon energy, like just being, just allowing.
Yeah. And, it even gives this example of how more heart attacks happen on Sundays.
On Sundays.
Yeah. The idea is that it's because we're so used to being go, go, go that we don't know how to actually relax and just be.
Oh, wow. We're not even giving our bodies a chance to recover.
Yeah. And so the text is emphasizing here is the importance of integrating both of those qualities within ourselves. The active and the receptive, the doing and the being. Because if we can't find that balance, it can create a lot of stress and disharmony in our lives.
It makes sense. Now, the text also brings in Gurdjieff's idea that the soul isn't something we're born with. It's something that we actually create. He called this process metanoia, which is like a fundamental shift in our way of thinking, a kind of repentance, you could say.
Right. It's like a turning inward.
Yeah.
And so Gurdjieff's perspective is really interesting because it's adding this whole other dimension to this idea of self-transformation.
Right.
It's suggesting that we actually have an active role in developing our souls. It's not just something that's given to us. And this kind of aligns with that Taoist idea of actively working to circulate the light within ourselves.
It's like we're co-creating our own souls through our actions, our thoughts, our choices.
Exactly. We're participating in that process. And then there's this really vivid image from the Book of the Yellow Castle. It talks about regulating life in the square inch field of the square foot house.
The square inch field of the square foot house. That's a really interesting image. What do you think that's referring to?
Well, the way I understand it, it's talking about how within this small space of our own body, right, we actually have the potential to govern our entire existence. It's like everything starts from within.
Right. It's like our body is this microcosm of the universe, and we have this incredible power to shape our reality from within that space.
Exactly. And the square inch that it mentions, that's often associated with the head or like the seat of our consciousness.
Right, the seat of our consciousness.
Yeah.
And it says that that's the dwelling place of the God of utmost emptiness in life.
Right. It's pointing to this really paradoxical idea that within us, we contain both emptiness, which is associated with the feminine principle,
They're receptive.
right, and vibrant life, which is the masculine principle.
Yeah.
And so it's about finding that balance, that point of inner governance within ourselves.
Finding that harmony.
Yeah.
Now, the text also makes it clear that the approach of Tao isn't about trying to force character development, you know?
Yeah.
It's not about trying to become a better person in some kind of moralistic sense. It's more about becoming filled with this inner light. And then as a result of that, those positive qualities will naturally start to emerge.
Right, right. And what's really interesting is that this is a different approach from some other spiritual paths. Some traditions really focus on directly changing your behavior or cultivating specific virtues. But Tao is saying that if we can cultivate this inner radiance, then those qualities will kind of shine through on their own. It's like working from the inside out.
It's a more organic process.
Yeah.
And then it mentions that the light is easy to move, but difficult to fix.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it contrasts this with yoga, which apparently tries to fix the light at the third eye.
Mhm.
Can you explain that a little bit? What's the significance of that difference?
Yeah. So that's a really key distinction.
Mhm.
So Tao emphasizes this continuous flow of energy,
Yeah.
right? This constant movement. But the yoga practice that's being described here, that's focused on a more concentrated, static point.
Okay.
So it's like two different approaches, two different methodologies for achieving inner transformation.
Right. One is about flow and the other is about focus.
Exactly.
Wow.
And, there's no right or wrong way. It's just two different approaches. Now, here's something that I think a lot of people will find really encouraging. The text says that everyone is born intelligent.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, right. And so it's not about whether you have intelligence or not. It's about finding your own unique form of intelligence.
Right. Recognizing your own unique gifts and talents.
Exactly. And, the text actually talks about how society tends to define intelligence in very narrow ways.
Yeah.
Like how well you do in school or how much money you make.
Right. Very limited criteria.
Yeah. And those limited definitions, they can create this sense of inadequacy in people,
Yeah.
Like you might feel stupid or not good enough just because you don't fit into that narrow definition.
Absolutely. It's like we're all trying to squeeze ourselves into the same box when we're all actually so different. And that's what makes us special.
Yeah. And the text even gives this great example, It talks about a poet who might feel foolish because they can't succeed as a businessman.
Right.
But it's like, that's not their intelligence. Their intelligence is in words and imagery and expressing emotions, So it's really important for us to recognize and value our own particular strengths and our own ways of understanding the world, rather than trying to be someone we're not.
Yeah, embrace your own unique genius. Don't compare yourself to others.
Exactly. Find your own path.
Yeah, let's talk about belief a little bit. Because the text actually says that skepticism and doubt, they're actually natural, even in spiritual contexts.
Right. And, a lot of people think that when you're on a spiritual path, you're not supposed to doubt.
Sure.
You're supposed to just have faith.
Blind faith.
Yeah. But what's really interesting is that the text actually makes this distinction between faith and trust.
Okay.
So faith is presented as something that kind of tries to shut down doubt. Like you just believe no matter what. But trust, on the other hand, trust embraces doubt.
Yeah.
It sees doubt as something that can actually strengthen your understanding and your connection.
So it's like doubt isn't the enemy of spirituality. It can actually be a tool for growth.
Exactly. It's about using that doubt to refine your understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And the text suggests that a trust that's been tested through doubt, that kind of trust, actually leads to a deeper inner unity, what some traditions would call soul.
It's like your faith becomes more solid because it's been forged in the fire of doubt. It's not just something that you blindly accept. It's something that you've wrestled with and come to your own understanding of.
Exactly. It's about integrating those questions in your convictions. Now, this next idea is a big one.
Yeah.
And it might be a little bit mind-bending for some people. But the text says that there's no real separation between us and the rest of existence.
Oh, wow.
Like, ultimately, everything is connected. All is one. That's the idea.
Yeah. That we're all part of this bigger whole. That's a tough concept to wrap our minds around.
It is. And the text acknowledges that, It says that a lot of people actually feel fear when they start to consider this idea.
Yeah.
Because our sense of being a separate individual, that's so ingrained in us. And so to start to question that, it can be really unsettling.
It challenges our whole sense of identity.
Yeah, and then, the text goes on to contrast Martin Buber's idea of I-thou dialogue in prayer, which is this sense of relating to a separate God, with this idea that the ultimate prayer is more like a monologue. And he uses this example of a Zen master who simply calls his own name.
Hmm.
And so the question is, what's the difference there? What's the text trying to point to?
Right. What's the significance of that difference?
Well, the way I understand it is that in that Zen master's practice, there's this recognition that ultimately, even the other that we perceive, whether it's God or the universe or whatever, it's not really separate from our own being,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay.
And so the ultimate realization is this experience of a unified existence, where those boundaries between I and you or I and God, they start to dissolve.
It's like realizing that everything is a reflection of ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, the text also talks about how our desires and the way we project our feelings onto things can make them seem really special, like we attach all this meaning to them.
Yeah.
And it uses this example of the Koh-i-Noor diamond, which is, this famous diamond that's been fought over for centuries.
Right. Yeah. And so what the text is pointing to here is this idea that a lot of the time it's our own minds that are creating this sense of specialness,
Yeah.
you know?
It's not inherent in the object itself.
Right. Like if you think about it, a diamond is just a piece of carbon, right?
Yeah.
But we project all these meanings and stories onto it. And that's what gives it its value. And so the text is encouraging us to become more aware of those projections so that we can start to see things more clearly, without all of those layers of meaning that we've added.
Like, see the diamond for what it is, not for all the stories and the history that we've attached to it.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, there's a really interesting passage where the text offers a different take on some of those traditional religious figures.
Oh, yeah. Like who?
Well, it suggests that, for example, Christ might have been more like Krishna, a figure of joy and celebration, someone who enjoyed life's pleasures.
That's not really the image that a lot of people have.
Right. Because we tend to think of Christ as this figure of suffering and sacrifice. But the text is suggesting that, maybe there was more to it than that. Maybe there was a balance. Maybe joy and the fullness of life are also part of that spiritual realization.
Right. It's about embracing the wholeness of life.
Yeah. And there's this one passage where it even imagines Jesus laughing on the cross, which is a very striking image. It's definitely meant to challenge our preconceptions.
Yeah, and it contrasts that with how society often represses our natural joy.
Right.
Like even in something as intimate as lovemaking.
Right.
It's like we've been conditioned to feel guilty about our pleasure,
Yeah.
about expressing our joy. And the text is suggesting that maybe that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Maybe we should be questioning those rules and those expectations that have been imposed on us.
Exactly.
Now, the conversation shifts to this idea of the primal spirit and our true nature. And the text describes these as aspects of ourselves that actually transcend time and space. Can you explain what it means by that?
Sure. So the primal spirit is described as this kind of fundamental source, like the origin point that exists before all the polarities, before heaven and earth even came into being. It's like the ground of all being.
Okay.
It's like the ultimate source from which everything arises. Right. And it's said to dwell in the square inch,
Yeah.
which again is often associated with the head or the seat of higher consciousness.
Right.
But then, in contrast to that, the text also talks about the conscious spirit, which is located more in the heart, and it's more influenced by the external world and our emotions. It's more reactive.
Okay. So we have this primal spirit, which is unchanging and eternal. And then we have this conscious spirit, which is more fluid and influenced by our experiences.
Exactly. And then the text asks this really interesting question. It says, can our dreams really reveal our true selves if our conscious waking life isn't authentic?
That's a good question. Because, a lot of people think of dreams as this window into the subconscious. But what you're saying is that if we're not living truthfully when we're awake, then our dreams might not be all that insightful either.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's like, if we're not being true to ourselves when we're conscious, then what's going on in our subconscious is going to be distorted as well.
Right. It's like garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, exactly. And so, while acknowledging Freud's contributions to drone analysis, the text emphasizes that we need to go beyond dreams. We need to reach a state of alert stillness in order to discover our original face, like who we are before all the conditioning, before all the masks we put on.
Right. To see our true selves stripped bare.
Yeah, and this actually ties into Gurdjieff's teaching about the personas we wear.
Right. those masks that we present to the world.
Exactly. And Gurdjieff observed that we waste so much energy trying to maintain these outward images of ourselves.
Right. And often it's to hide our insecurities or to project an image that we think is more acceptable.
Exactly. And the text emphasizes that it's only through a state of awake presence that we can truly see ourselves and start to drop those personas.
To become more authentic.
Yeah, and that can be a really uncomfortable process,
Yeah.
because it means facing those parts of ourselves that we've been trying to hide.
But it's necessary for growth. Now, the text also talks about this illusion of time. And it contrasts the Eastern perspective, which often includes this idea of many past lives, with the fleeting nature of the present moment.
Right. And, the Eastern view is really emphasizing the seemingly endless nature of our memories and our imaginations.
Right. Like we're constantly dwelling on the past or projecting into the future.
Exactly. And so the text suggests that those can become distractions from the only moment that truly exists, which is the present.
Right. The here and now.
Yeah. And it even describes the present moment as only being accessible through complete awareness, like that unwavering attention to what's happening right now.
It's like we have to be fully present in order to experience the present.
Yeah. And, the text even goes so far as to call the past and future thieves.
Thieves.
Yeah, because they steal our attention from the present moment. They rob us of that direct experience of life.
They keep us from being fully alive.
Exactly. And then it uses this example of Jesus being fully present at the moment of his death. Like he was here now facing eternity.
That's a powerful image.
It is. And it's highlighting the importance of being fully engaged in this moment right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's seen as the gateway to a timeless, eternal dimension of existence.
It's like in that moment of complete presence, we step outside of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the text also explores this idea of the nature of God. And it contrasts the anxiety that some people feel about the idea of a personalized God ceasing to exist, with the more Taoist and Buddhist concept of God as nothingness.
Right, as emptiness.
Right. And it suggests that those who have cultivated this familiarity with emptiness, they might actually find it easier to transition at the time of death.
Yeah, because they're not clinging to a specific image of God,
Right.
They're more comfortable with the unknown.
With the mystery.
Yeah. And then we get into some really interesting Taoist symbolism.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
Okay, so there's this idea of the elixir of life, and it has 3 key ingredients.
Okay. What are they?
So the first one is seed water.
Seed water.
Yeah, and that represents our vital creative energy. It's often associated with sexuality, but it's more than just that.
Yeah.
It's like the life force that flows through us.
Right. It's that primal energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the second ingredient is spirit fire.
Spirit fire.
Right. And that represents our conscious intellect, our reason. It's the domain of science and psychology.
Okay.
And then the third ingredient is thought earth.
Thought earth.
Yeah. And that represents our intuition, our unconscious. It's the realm of art and parapsychology. And the text explains that when this seed water, this vital energy, it moves upwards, it can actually transcend both our conscious and unconscious minds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it makes this really clear point that the body itself isn't the problem.
Oh, that's interesting. Because a lot of spiritual traditions kind of demonize the body,
Right. But this text is saying that the body is inherently good. It's beautiful.
It's neutral.
Yeah. It's the mind that's the problem. It's the mind with all of its attachments and its illusions. That's the root of our suffering.
It's the mind that needs to be tamed or transformed.
Yeah.
Now, the text also talks about surrender and ego.
Right.
And it emphasizes how important it is to become aware of how our ego operates, in all the subtle ways that it tries to control our lives, and then to gradually let go of those ego-driven approaches.
Right. And it even cautions us against blindly surrendering to just anyone, especially to someone who has a big ego themselves.
Oh, yeah. That's important. Because there are a lot of, gurus and teachers out there who might try to exploit that desire for surrender.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's about being discerning.
Yeah. And the text suggests that true surrender to love, like genuine love, that might become possible once we've started to transcend our own ego. But until then, it's really important to be careful.
To use our discernment.
Yeah.
Now, the text also briefly touches on this idea of a Sanya's experiment.
Okay. What's that?
Well, it's about creating this kind of mini world where both worldly aspects and meditation are accepted.
Okay.
And the idea is that by doing that, we can start to understand that true inner peace isn't dependent on our external circumstances. It's something that we cultivate within ourselves.
Right. It's about finding that balance between being in the world but not of the world.
Exactly.
And then there's this really interesting anecdote about a woman who keeps confessing to the same experience over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
And it almost seems like she enjoys expressing these suppressed desires.
Hmm.
And so this example is really highlighting how complex our inner lives can be
Right.
and how the things that we repress, they don't just go away. They can manifest in these really unexpected ways.
Like that can pop up in our dreams or our fantasies or even our behaviors.
Yeah, exactly. And it also touches on this idea that sometimes when we're offended by something, it's actually because it resonates with something that we've suppressed within ourselves. Like it's hitting a nerve.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like our offense is actually a reflection of our own shadow.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this leads into a discussion about sexuality and meditation.
Right.
And the text suggests that as we go through inner transformation, the intensity of our sexual energy might actually decrease, or even the focus of that energy might shift.
Right.
And it encourages us to transform that energy into a more meditative energy,
Yeah.
by changing its direction, like moving it inward and upward.
Right. And this redirection of energy is actually presented as a key to unlocking those deeper levels of consciousness. And it's symbolized by the opening of the bud of the golden
The
flower.
bud of the golden flower.
Yeah.
Now, there are also these two really interesting philosophical anecdotes.
Yeah. Tell me about them.
Okay, so one is about a drunken philosopher in a graveyard,
Okay.
and the other one is about a boss who's trying to seduce his secretary, but he's using all this really intellectual language.
Interesting.
And so the question is, what are these anecdotes meant to illustrate?
Well, the way I see it is that, that first anecdote about the philosopher, it's kind of poking fun at this idea of trying to intellectualize life's big questions,
Right.
but without actually having any real experience of them.
It's like head knowledge versus heart knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the second anecdote about the boss and the secretary, that's kind of satirizing the way that we can use big words and concepts to try and mask our more basic desires.
Right, like to try and sound more sophisticated than we actually are.
Exactly. And so it's highlighting this disconnect between our thoughts and our true motivations.
Right, like we can talk a good game, but are we actually living what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about these Taoist concepts of anima and animus, because, a lot of people might not be familiar with those terms.
Yeah.
Can you break them down for us?
Yeah, sure. So in this context, anima refers to the feminine principle within us all.
Okay.
It's often associated with yin, with receptivity, with the substance of consciousness. And then animus is the masculine principle. It's associated with yang, with activity, with the spirit that's said to dwell in the eyes.
Okay.
And the text suggests that being too attached to our physical form, our bodies, that can actually limit the expression of the animus.
Okay.
So it's like we're holding our spirit back by being so identified with our physical selves.
Right.
And then it explains that practices like circulating the light, these can actually help to concentrate the animus
Okay.
and strengthen our spirit
Right.
and bring it into a better balance with the anima.
Okay. So it's about integrating those masculine and feminine energies within ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this whole process is actually described as a way of purifying ourselves, like melting away what it calls the slag of darkness
Yeah.
so that we can return to a state of pure creativity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that